President Nixon today made the momentous decision to build an anti-ballistic missile system. First, he told congressional leaders about it, and then he held a televised news conference at which the country and the world learned what his intentions are. The system will not be the Sentinel, the one calculated to protect major population centers from a communist Chinese attack. Rather, it will be built around existing missile sites away from the cities. Here is some of what he said.
After long study of all of the options available, I have concluded that the Sentinel program, previously adopted, should be substantially modified. The new program that I have recommended this morning to the leaders and that I announced today is one that perhaps best can be described as a safeguard program. It is a safeguard against any attack by the Chinese communists that we can foresee over the next 10 years. It is a safeguard of our deterrent system, which is increasingly vulnerable due to the advances that have been made by the Soviet Union since the year 1967, when the Sentinel program was first laid out. It is a safeguard also against any irrational or accidental attack that might occur of less than massive magnitude, which might be launched from the Soviet Union. The program also does not do some things which should be clearly understood. It does not provide defense for our cities, and for that reason the sites have been moved away from our major cities. I have made the decision with regard to this particular point because I found that there is no way, even if we were to expand the limited Sentinel system, which was planned for some of our cities, to a so-called heavy or thick system, there is no way that we can adequately defend our cities without an unacceptable loss of life. The only way that I have concluded that we can save lives, which is the primary purpose of our defense system, is to prevent war. And that is why the emphasis of this system is on protecting our deterrent, which is the best preventive for war.
President, do you have reason to believe that the Russians will interpret your ABM decision today as not being an escalating move in the arms race?
Matter of fact, Mr. Kaplow, I have reason to believe, based on the past record, that they would interpret it just the other way around. First, when they deployed their own ABM system, and as you know, they have 67 missiles, ABM sites deployed around Moscow, they rejected the idea that it escalated the arms race on the ground that it was defensive solely in character. And second, when the United States last year went forward on the Sentinel system, 4 days later, the Soviet Union initiated the opportunity to have arms limitation talks. I think the Soviet Union recognizes very clearly the difference between a defensive posture and an offensive posture.
There's been a great deal of criticism in Congress against the deployment of any type of anti-missile defense system. What kind of reception do you think that your proposal this morning will receive?
It'll be a very spirited debate, and it will be a very close vote. Debates in the field of national defense are often spirited, and the votes are often close. Many of my friends in Congress who were there before I was there remarked that the vote on extending the draft in 1941 won by only one vote. This might be that close. I think, however, that after the members of the House and the Senate consider this program, which is a minimum program, but which particularly provides options to change in other directions if we find the threat has changed or that the art has changed, our evaluation of the technique has changed. I think that we have a good chance of getting approval. We will, of course, express our views, and we hope that we will get support in the country.
The Huntley Brinkley Report is produced by NBC News and brought to you in color by Anheuser-Busch Incorporated, St. Louis, Missouri. Brewers of world renown, Budweiser, king of beer.
More Budweiser. Boy, you can sure tell it's pick-a-pair time. Yes, sir, more and more people are picking up 2 six-packs of Bud. It's the smart way to buy the king of beers. But you know that. Boy, do I ever. Right now at stores everywhere, look for this special pick-a-pair display. Ah, yes, there's a handsome chap. And take home 2 six-packs of Bud. That's the smart way to buy the king of beers. But you know that. Buy Bud.
The president's strategy on the ABM obviously was well studied. He let the opposition say what it pleased, and he remained silent. He took counsel for weeks from his advisors, and this morning he called in congressional leaders and told them his plans. He listed the alternatives he felt he had, and he made it plain that what he was about to do was exploratory and that his decision would not be an irreversible one. And next week, the administration supporters will have their innings before the Congress. Senate Majority Leader Mansfield said today he believes the president has enough votes for the ABM to pass. NBC News correspondent Robert Goralski reports on other Capitol Hill reaction.
The president said he expected spirited congressional debate on his proposed ABM system, and he got it within minutes after he concluded his news conference.
Generally speaking, and with some reluctance, I approve it, but I approve it as the minimal proposal necessary for the protection of our deterrent forces.
My question is simply this. As of yesterday, the proponents of ABM defended a system and supported a system and would have voted funds for a system which would deployed an ABM system, including Spartan and Sprint, around 20 cities in the United States. I opposed that. I opposed it because I felt it was an escalation and I felt it was a fraud. Now, and we maintained then that probably the slowdown in the ABM system by the Soviets was simply because they recognized the inadequacy of it, and we were really laughed at. Today, the proponents of ABM now are quite willing to abandon the system that yesterday they fought so hard for. And they are now saying, along with us, we're all united on this, that there isn't a really effective defense system that can be deployed around the cities, and it's a misuse of our national resources, a poor priority. Why? Why this sudden change of heart, then?
Well, I'll be glad to respond. First of all, there's no slowdown. When the senator gets briefed on Monday, he'll find that the Soviets are now in the process of developing a third generation. And there's been a pause in the Moscow area to deploy a new system, which will be far more sophisticated than anything they have now. And it's certainly bad news as far as the Western world is concerned.
This system does protect us against irrational attacks, against the unsophisticated Chinese system, we are told, for at least 10 years. It is an all-round protection. It removes the menace of sudden Russian attacks against the cities themselves.
Only one city will be fully protected by the modified Sentinel, Washington, D.C. It was announced that the nation's capital will have long and short-range defensive missiles to make sure the National Command Authority doesn't break down. There are 12 sites to be constructed by the mid-1970s. Apart from Washington, the others will be located at generally remote sites. Until today, the Pentagon had not been involved in the ABM debate. Defense Department officials preferred to remain silent until after the president had made his decision. This afternoon, the Pentagon presented details and its justification for the modified Sentinel. Among other things, it released for the first time pictures of the Sentinel test operations on the island of Kwajalein in the Pacific. Here's where the long-range Spartan missiles have been fired in simulated attacks from California-launched ICBMs. Spartans, along with the short-range, high-acceleration Sprints, will be deployed at all 12 Sentinel sites. Most of the country will be broadly protected by the Spartans, which intercept incoming missiles outside the atmosphere. Many scientists said Sentinel will not work. Deputy Defense Secretary David Packard dismissed their arguments today by saying it's difficult to get scientists to agree on most things. Robert Goralski, NBC News, Washington.
On Vietnam, the president was short and sharp and careful not to disclose just what the United States intends to do in the face of the present enemy offensive. But he left no doubt in the minds of his listeners that the United States is carefully weighing the alternatives.
Is your patience growing a little thin with these continued attacks, particularly such as came out of the DMZ today?
Mr. Smith, you may recall that on March 4th, when I received a similar question at an earlier stage in the attacks, I issued what was interpreted widely as a warning. It will be my policy as president to issue a warning only once, and I will not repeat it now. Anything that in the future is done will be done. There will be no additional warning. Any escalation of the war in Vietnam has been the responsibility of the enemy. If the enemy de-escalates its attacks, ours will go down. We are not trying to step it up. We are trying to do everything that we can in the conduct of our war in Vietnam to see that we can go forward toward peace in Paris. That is why my response has been a measured, deliberate, and some think too cautious. But it will continue to be that way because I'm thinking of those peace talks every time I think of a military option in Vietnam.
President Nixon said his defense budget will come in about $2.5 billion, less than that of the proposed Johnson budget, but he indicated that domestic problems could eat up the savings on defense. Mr. Nixon said he will issue a statement next week on campus disorders and particularly on the question of cutting off federal aid to rebellious students. Asked about the Middle East, the president said that the United States, Britain, France, and Russia are not together on the matter and that a lot of yardage has yet to be closed.
Hi, I'm Anita Bryant. You know, you don't have to shop in an orange grove to get that good-tasting natural orange juice from Florida. You can get it any day in your favorite store. Look, fresh frozen concentrate. This little can makes a big pitcher full, or ready to serve in bottles or cartons, and an easy-to-store can. Any way you buy it, it's all pure juice from Florida oranges. Florida oranges have that good natural sunshine taste because they spend months drinking in all that good natural Florida sunshine. Come to the Florida Sunshine Tree. That's where you get a glass of energy. Orange juice with natural vitamin C at the Florida Sunshine Tree. Why not put a little sunshine in your day? Remember, breakfast without orange juice is like a day without sunshine.
Israeli Foreign Minister Abba Eban, who is in Washington for talks with the administration officials, today outlined the Israeli position on the Middle East in a talk before the National Press Club. Yesterday, he saw Secretary of State Rogers and today President Nixon, and presumably he told both the kind of peace Israel will settle for. NBC News correspondent James Robinson reports.
Mr. Eban has counseled President Nixon against an imposed big force solution to the Middle East problem, and he has expressed doubts the nations there would slide into another war. Earlier today at the National Press Club, Eban was questioned about Israel's nuclear development and its reluctance to sign the Non-Proliferation Treaty.
As a national policy, Israel has decided that it will not be the first state to introduce nuclear weapons into the Middle East, and that policy has not changed. The question of the treaty, now that it is becoming ratified by a number of states, is being examined by my government as it is by other governments, especially in Europe. I've noticed discussions in Japan, in Italy, in Germany, in some Latin American countries. Well, if these countries have reason to look at the thing from a very long-term viewpoint, then Israel has as well. And we are going forward with an examination of the treaty, as are other states in our position.
On that same line, sir, have the Israeli nuclear reactors produced more than 5 kilos of plutonium?
I don't know what plutonium is and what significance there are in 5 kilos of it.
If, as charged, Israel has a nuclear weapons program, it might explain its reluctance to sign the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. For the mere threat of a nuclear capability would be a valuable tool for the Israelis in future negotiations with the Arabs. James Robinson, NBC News, Washington.
Israeli planes today bombed a suspected Arab commando position inside Jordan, and the Jordanians said 2 civilians were killed. The Suez Canal was quiet. Suez itself was hard hit in this week's exchanges of artillery fire, and a number of oil tanks were set afire. Yesterday, Egyptian officials took correspondents on a tour of the city. NBC News correspondent Frank Burkholzer reports.
One of the Israeli shells that crossed the Suez Canal in the recent outburst of fighting made this wreckage out of a house in the Egyptian city of Suez. Egyptian authorities showed the Suez bomb damage to correspondents in a guided tour as part of their campaign to emphasize the suffering of people living along the firing line. Tours to Suez and other canal towns are nothing especially new, and some of the ruins they showed us were many months old. But Suez was hit again this last time, and 30 or 40 buildings suffered. There were casualties, at least 17 dead and 50 persons injured, the Egyptians say. Ready as they are to disclose the civilian casualties, the Egyptians are not eager to reveal the damage to their oil refineries. Correspondents never got past the gate of the Suez installation, and filming was discouraged. The authorities say that some 60,000 people still live and work in Suez despite the periodic shellings. And they also say that these people will refuse to be frightened into leaving. This is Frank Burkholzer, NBC News in Suez.
Touring with kids was a problem. But nowadays, whatever size your family, you're number one at a Holiday Inn. With our free advance reservations, you never have to worry. And kids under 12 are free in your room. Whether you're staying at a Holiday Inn on the highway or one of our luxury resorts, you will always receive number one service at a sensible price. Number one service like free ice, free TV in each room, a swimming pool at each end. And every Holiday Inn has a number one restaurant with a menu for the whole family. Every Sunday at every inn, a real old-fashioned family-style fried chicken dinner. So next time you're touring, stay at a Holiday Inn where you're number one.
The Huntley-Brinkley Report continues, brought to you by
Anacin, with the specific compound that relaxes tension as it relieves headache pain. Reach for Anacin.
If you love me, Grandma, you'll give me curly hair.
Oh, there's your curly hair.
I thought you said your fingers were getting old.
Oh, that's just when my arthritis kicks up. And then my fingers feel stiff. Well, Julie, that's where my friend Anacin comes in. It's wonderful the way it helps relieve my pain for hours.
How do I look?
Anacin tablets have more of the pain reliever doctors prescribe most. For minor arthritis pain, for more freedom of movement without pain, Anacin.
On Wednesday, part of a psychologist's report on Sirhan Sirhan was read into the court record. A woman who read the testimony in the newspaper called the New York Times and said it bore a striking similarity to a book she had read on criminal psychology. Well, it was similar. A psychologist in the Sirhan trial said he had read the book, and the publisher is now thinking of suing for plagiarism. A House subcommittee investigating the Pueblo seizure today was told the National Security Agency sent a message to the Joint Chiefs of Staff warning that the Pueblo mission was risky. But according to Congressman Otis Pike, the message was never delivered.
Well, the tale of what happened to that message is pretty sad. First of all, it was directed to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. No member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff got that message. It was redirected by a staff member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff to the Commander-in-Chief Pacific. The information we have is that the Commander-in-Chief Pacific never got that message. A copy of the message as redirected to the Commander-in-Chief Pacific was supposed to have been sent on a for information basis to the Chief of Naval Operations. That copy was never delivered.
Is this because of military bureaucracy or what?
Well, we are trying very hard not to make judgments at this stage in the proceeding, but simply to state facts. But I think that the facts in this case speak for themselves. When a message of this importance doesn't get where it's sent, there's something wrong with the system.
A Navy spokesman this afternoon told NBC News that it's quite possible for a message to go astray, that things like that just sometimes happen. Student protests forced the closing of 2 Chicago colleges today and the Rutgers University campus in Newark, New Jersey. In recent weeks, demonstrations and protests have spread to high schools. NBC News correspondent Sidney Lazard reports on a sit-in and boycott at one high school in Paterson, New Jersey.
The situation at East Side High School followed the pattern set in many colleges throughout the country. Negro students had presented school officials with 11 demands, including a stronger emphasis on black culture and appointment of a black vice principal. The demands weren't met, so the students took over the school auditorium. After what authorities deemed a suitable period, police were called in to clear them out. The students left peacefully, but started boycotting the school. Some Negro leaders in Paterson view what is happening at East Side as part of a new awareness among Negro high school students throughout the country.
The students now are discovering through organizations like the Black Panthers and other organizations, SCLC, and black history courses not only being taught in some schools, but in other organizations sponsoring them, that we are black and we should be proud.
East Side High School is almost equally divided between black and white students. Until now, there has been almost no racial conflict. Many white students sympathize with and support a majority of the demands made by their black classmates.
The main thing that many of the students are angry at or against are the tactics that are being used by the black students in the school. The sit-ins, the boycotts, etc.
How do you think they should go about getting what they want?
Well, our student council meetings are open to anyone. We've got suggestion boxes set up, and anybody who has any complaints can have them handed fairly by us, and then they're brought to the administration of the Board of Education. Now, if they've got demands or requests that they feel should be heard, they could have brought it to us first before any of this was all started.
City officials have charged that the students are being influenced by outsiders. Last night, the students held a meeting, and a lot of non-students were there. Local leaders of civil rights groups ranging from the NAACP to the Black Panthers pledged their support to the students. But the students ran the meeting themselves, and when they announced what they were going to do next, the decision they had taken was theirs.
It's been stated that black people are timid as a race. But I'd like to say that all of us are going to combine together and make this a everyone fight. And I would like to say that to ask none of my black brothers, white brothers, Puerto Rican brothers, not to go to school tomorrow, the next day, or next year until we have got our demands met. And the boycott is still on.
Today, classes were held as usual at the high school, but few black students attended. Many observed the boycott by staying home.
Everybody repeat after me. Hujambo. Hujambo. Hujambo.
Some gathered at the headquarters of the Paterson Poverty Agency, where they set up their own classes and study programs, including this class in Swahili.
Stronger. Hujambo. Hodi. 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 Hodi.
The situation here at East Side High School has its own specifics, but it's part of a general pattern of behavior among Negro students at many high schools in this country. What's happened is that the black protest movement has reached down and recruited a new generation of militants. Older militants say it's a generation whose protests have just begun to be heard. Sidney Lazard, NBC News, Paterson, New Jersey.
Put Terryton's charcoal filter in front of any other cigarette. It might make it better, tasting, but not quite like the Terryton taste you get. Activated charcoal filter Terryton. Ooh. Activated charcoal, smoother tasting. Ooh. Maybe
it's possible to attach it. It could be done. Our charcoal filter, but your smoke won't smoke as smooth as Terryton. That's why there's no question, which is which. That's why us Terryton smokers would rather fight than switch. Us Terryton smokers would rather fight than switch.
Thousands of Czechoslovak students today demonstrated outside the Yugoslav embassy in Prague to express support for Yugoslavia, which is holding a Communist Party Congress. Apollo 9 astronauts McDivitt, Scott, and Schweikart arrived in Houston today and were reunited with their families. President de Gaulle and West German Chancellor Kiesinger today ended 2 days of talk in Paris. They continued to disagree on the European common market. Sources in Moscow said today that Communist China has stopped Soviet arms shipments to North Vietnam at the Chinese border, apparently in reprisal for the border fight on the 2nd of March. The State Department announced that travel restrictions to Communist China, North Vietnam, North Korea, and Cuba are going to be extended for 6 months. The Chicago Police Department has ended its inquiry into misconduct by policemen during the Democratic Convention. 35 were suspended from 2 to 30 days. Prices went down on the New York Stock Exchange. The Dow Jones Industrial Average lost almost 3 points, and the value of an average share of common stock decreased 22 cents. A New York City official said today that 31,000 abandoned cars were towed away last year, and that on any day there are about 2,000 derelicts on the streets, sitting there in a vapid state of decay, sans wheels, sans batteries, sans extras, sans spirit, sans even a rescue mission. Each one was once a thing of beauty and a source of pride. It sparkled, it accelerated, it was washed and polished, it luxuriated in the impersonal affection of an insurance company, and it developed its character. We used to have the decency to dispatch our horse with a merciful bullet, but these concentrated packages of horsepower won't even attract the vultures. Like the nuclear physicist who said that the genius was not he who extracted the power from the atom, but rather he who put it there in the first place, so the Nobel man of this age is not he who made the automobile, but he who figures out how to get rid of it. Good night for NBC News.
You get many different descriptions of a common complaint.
It's a stuffy, uncomfortable feeling for me.
It's a tense, tight burning sensation.
An upset stomach.
I suppose is a very precise description. All I know is that it's a rotten, miserable feeling.
Recognize your description of heartburn and acid indigestion. People are affected differently, but one product relieves all those symptoms. Digel, the extra action antacid, with the extra action of simethicone. This white layer of Digel contains effective antacids to neutralize excess acid. This yellow layer contains simethicone in a patented formulation that breaks up frothy bubbles of gas to help relax your tense, tight stomach. So whatever you call indigestion distress, remember Digel with simethicone is the extra action antacid that brings you more complete relief. Tablets or liquid.
An aging convict is